Hey guys, so in this video you and I are going to talk a little bit about things I think you should think about before you join a startup. So let's get into it. Let's define a startup. Now I have talked to startups and I don't know what my definition was of a startup before I started working for them, but you know, my first startup, and I think that's a startup, was like 3 people working together. We had nothing, we had a budget, not much in terms of revenue, and we worked our absolute asses off. That's to me a startup. Then I've been and talked to Klarna and Spotify and a few other so-called startups, and per their definition, they're also a startup. Kind of weird that a company that is worth billions is considered a startup, but it's at my current startup that I kind of landed in a definition that I can understand to a point, but it kind of makes the definition a little bit weird. My boss said that a startup is more or less defined by it is a company that is not making money. It's a company, and it doesn't matter much in terms of how big it is. It's just a company that doesn't have a yearly secured profit, if you will, which is the case for Spotify, for example. Anyway, to me, a startup is that type of company. It's the type of company that has priorities set. Like it's actually nice to have the label startup in a way, because it gives you a sense of the priorities of the company. But let's get to like my definition of what a startup is. For me, that definition is a little bit too broad. For me, a startup is a small company basically with an application idea. You work without much in terms of process. You work mostly with the same people. You have a very small company. Let's say that you're under 50 people, something like that, and everybody's basically in charge of everything at the same time. That to me is a more sane definition of a startup. So let's talk about what you should think about before you start at one of these companies. Now, the best part about working at a startup is that often startups are a little bit younger companies. They usually have very modern technology, which is absolutely amazing. You get to work with all kinds and because there's so few of they put a lot of effort into hiring most of the time some of the best programmers. If you are in a startup, you can trust that one of two things is true. The people who are working there are very broad, like they know a lot of stuff. They may not be masters of everything, but they know a lot of stuff. Or you have a few people who are highly skilled in a very specific field. And the reason why that is because as a startup, you don't have scale, you don't have the size, you don't have the pockets to pay people all that much. You need to, so that the only option is to try to get people into the culture, like build a good culture, build a good ecosystem for basically people who are more interested, I'm not saying that you can't get paid. It's more you are more driven by other factors than the biggest paycheck possible, because in general a startup will not have that deep those type of pockets. So you can trust for the most part that passionate, skilled developers are to be found in a startup. Now, those are some of the best things. Other things that are great is that, as I was saying, like startups have to sell themselves on something besides money, which means that they usually are very friendly and warm, and they have a lot of they try to be very family oriented, like family friendly, and like have that's my experience anyway. You get to know people on a very deep personal level, and you kind of have to expect that, because you're going to have to work pretty hard, because the startup survival is based on having really good people, and without really good people, we're making sure that they go the extra mile and making all the right decisions, the startup won't survive. So that's at least what I found. That's the best part about working at a startup. It's absolutely perfect for somebody who is really interested into programming. Like you want to work with people who are equally passionate about what they do. You have a lot of freedom. For the most part, you will find that there's not so much process in general, and yeah, I'm not saying that the quality, like the quality of the product is worse, but you don't have to. There's not so much process. There's not like in a big company. It's all like there's like 100 people who are always who are weighing in on every single decision. So the administration takes a lot of time in general in large companies. That's not so in a startup, because they simply can't afford it. They need to move quickly. So those are the best parts, in my opinion, about working in a startup. The downside, let's talk about those. The downside for working in a startup is that in general you get paid less, simply because they can't afford to pay you more, and you have less stability. Most startups fail. They last a few years, and maybe that's okay, maybe that's not okay. Don't know. That's up to you. But to me, like that's a big tip for you. Like, you make sure if you go into, especially if it's a really, really small startup, like just a few people in like a rented office or something, you need to make sure that you're checking how much budget they have, because trust me, you don't want to join a company and then have that company fail like a few months later and have that on your CV. That's a bad investment for you, because people will ask you questions about it. I know it's silly, but there's a lot of people who will look at you, who think it's kind of weird if you just work at a place for a few months. So it's just a warning, nothing big, but make sure that they have enough budget to actually pay you for at least a year or something like that. And then other things that aren't so great is that even though you generally get to work with a lot of fun loving people, and you have a very loose like general atmosphere in the company, you will have to kind of accept that some people have varying degrees of expertise. There's not much in terms of process. Like, you're going to have to play a lot of things by ear, and sometimes you need to go light on testing in order for the release speed, because at a startup everything is it's a little bit more chaotic. You need to ship value and get features out so that you can start getting more and more money, so you can stabilize, because everybody's about stabilize the company, make sure that we get money so that we can survive, because it's a fight for survival basically when at a startup, which means that things have to move very, very quickly. So and that's actually very fun if you're in that zone and you like that type of environment. But as I said, you kind of have to live with that everything isn't all that refined, and you need to have a little bit of resilience to be able to deal with that, I suppose. Then apart from that, I would say that something also that you need to be a little bit cautious with when it comes to being at a startup is that if you go in as a junior developer, you should be very, very mindful that you go into the right startup, because, as I said, the company's priority is survival, and it's about moving fast, which means that if you can't keep up, or if you're causing delays and problems in the company, it can be a little bit of a problem. And it gets much bigger when, as I said, when the company is small, like they can't really afford too many fuck-ups. Which is why I will tell you, as a junior developer, I'm not saying that you shouldn't work for a startup. I'm just saying that you need to be extra transparent with your skill level. For the love of God, don't try to convince them that you're better than you are, because it's going to come back and bite you in the ass. Bad. It's going to come up and bite you bad. So make sure that if you're joining a startup, they know your skill level, they understand what you're good at and what you're bad at. Don't try to fool them. Don't you do anything like that. Just be really honest, because if you're there to learn, they need to know that. Because in a startup, everybody's doing everything, and that's why it's such a great thing. If you can live in that environment, it's such a great thing, because you will, honestly, I don't think there's anywhere you're going to learn as much as in that environment, because you have to be everything at the same time, because they don't have one person for each thing. You get very diverse very quickly, and that, to me, I love it. It's absolutely great, and I hope that if you feel the same way, that you will look into joining a startup. But as I said, if you are a absolute beginner, be sure that you communicate that very clear. I would even say that probably the best bet, if I were to go back to my junior self and I would tell them, I would probably say something like along the lines, spend a year or two working for a big company so you can get some experience, like working in an environment where you're a little bit more protected and you can kind of just learn the ropes so that you know how software development works, and then go into the startup when you have one or like a year or something at least at a bigger company. Because when you go into the startup, things move much quicker. It's just a general tip. This is, doesn't have to be true, but that's the way I feel about it. So to summarize, good parts about a startup: everything moves really quickly, you get to learn a lot of stuff, you get to have a great deal of fun with a lot of people, and you have a lot of influence over how things are moving. Bad things: it's a very chaotic environment in general, you get less money, and you have a lot of responsibility. That's basically it. Hopefully this was useful to you.